Hello.
Hello, Matt.
Good to talk to you. And the big news, of course, is at the time of this taping, I can declare a winner, and that is the Nationals and the Orioles both won last night. Now, when this airs, they could both have lost the crucial Game 5s. But for now, at least, as we tape this...
Is Game 5 tonight?
There are Game 5s tonight for the Orioles and the Nationals. The O's go up against the dreaded and hated New York Yankees to decide who goes on. And the Nationals, of course, playing the St. Louis Cardinals, whom I do not know.
Now, do you have to choose sides now in the Beltway? Do you have to be O's or Nats? You can't be both?
No, you can be both. That's the thing. For now, you can be both. It's not like, I think in other cities like New York, you're either a Yankees fan or a Mets fan. Because of the geographic distance, because there's no bad blood yet between the two teams. They only play a little bit during interleague play. It's okay. It's socially acceptable to root for both. In fact, a couple nights ago when it was announced that the Nationals had won, apparently there was some plate applause at Camden Yards amongst Orioles fans celebrating a Nationals victory, actually. And so,
if they actually both made it to the series, perhaps the bad blood will start.
We can only hope. I hope that it's ugly. I hope that it's reminiscent of the 2003 Red Sox-Yankees series when Pedro Martinez threw Don Zimmer to the ground and Roger Clemens was brushing, hitting batters. And I hope it gets really nasty and ugly. It would be really fun to have a great rivalry, but that will create a moral dilemma for me, Bill. I'm from Maryland, grew up an Orioles fan, but now work in D.C., live in Northern Virginia. So people like me eventually would have to, make that tough choice. They're in different leagues. So for now, we've been able to avoid that.
I grew up in New York, and I was in the suburbs, so actually I didn't feel, I didn't have to choose between Bronx or Queens. I actually felt I could root for both, and they were never good at the same time, so your loyalties were never really tested. And then in 2000, when we did the Subway Series, and I was living in California at the time, and I was just happy that there was a Subway Series. There was the boyhood dream, and then you're watching it, and you're seeing all the hubbub going on in New York from afar, and my reaction was, wow, New York's full of douchebags. It's not very exciting. This makes me hate my hometown. It's one of those, watch what you wish for kind of deals.
Well, it is weird because the Orioles have not been in the playoffs for like 15 years. And now all of a sudden, nobody expected them. They did well this year. Went all the way to the last game of the season and then ended up losing the division to the Yankees, but of course got in by winning a wild card game. Meanwhile, the Nationals seem to have an empire on their hands, on the verge of what could turn into some sort of a dynasty, we think. But this is the first time the Nationals have been to the playoffs ever. I think it was 1933 when the Washington Senators were last in post. I'm tired, by the way. I think you are too. I
am tired.
My thing, when I don't get a lot of sleep, I have a hard time with the recall thing. With words. And I will say this, living on the East Coast kind of sucks because when I'm out on the West Coast, Monday Night Football starts at like 6 o'clock. It's done at 9. But here on the East Coast, when you watch a debate, the thing doesn't start till 9. It ends at 11:30, and then you start writing, right? You don't go to sleep at 11:30. So I was up very late last night, and of course the Orioles simultaneously, at least I killed two birds with one stone. They went to the 13th inning before vanquishing the dreaded Yankees in the 13th inning. So forgive me for sleep deprivation.
Well, back when we were kids, you can't do this for debates, of course, but for sports events, the playoffs, a lot of those games would be, 4 o'clock in the afternoon for the East Coast teams, and the West Coast teams might play, 7 p.m. East Coast but 4 p.m. West Coast. And so if you're a child and you like baseball, you could actually watch without, losing all hope of sleep.
It was great. The problem I have, the
And
problem, Bill, is that because the Orioles are playing the Yankees, almost every game is going to be in prime time because they see that as a ratings thing.
Well, I mean, there's been this whole shift to making everything prime time to maximize TV revenue, but back in the day, it wasn't all about TV revenue. There actually was some attempt to say let's produce a product that families can enjoy.
Right. That's a good point.
Let's have ticket prices that families can actually afford.
My son is not. He's not even 2 years old, but if he were 5 or 7 or 8, I mean, we would want to watch the games together. I mean, I couldn't have like a 5 or 6 year old up watching a baseball game at 2 a.m. as I was last night. So you make a good point. Family values, Bill.
It's outrageous. All right, but so that's the sports soapbox I'm tired too. But the debates, as everyone knows, vice presidential debates are always determinative of the outcome of every presidential election. So what happened last night, Matt?
Well, first of all, I sense your sarcasm. We need to disclose when we're being sarcastic so we don't end up like Roger Simon. It is funny because I feel like the cynical media this year has tried to stress how nothing matters, right? Conventions don't matter, they're nothing but, they're shows, they're staged. Debates don't matter. Well, some of this stuff does matter. But if there's an argument to be made that something is irrelevant, it's probably the vice presidential debates. They can be entertaining, but do they matter? Do they move the needle? Probably not. Other than dominating a news cycle or two, it's better to win than it is to lose. But they're probably not definitive or predictive. So, having said that, Bill, you asked the question. I think it was a draw, but to me, the really interesting thing was, and what I've been writing about at the Daily Caller is the fight over the narrative. Because to me, there were two. As soon as the debate ended, I saw two very positive. The two most likely narratives were either, "Wow, Joe Biden was tough. He was aggressive. Obama's back on track. Biden did what he had to do. He redeemed Obama." Or Biden was rude. He was smirking. He was laughing. He was a jerk. One of those two narratives were going to win. And my prediction was that the former would win, that the media is liberally biased and they want to write the Obama comeback story, so they're going to like the Biden was tough meme. But, and it's still early, we're recording this fairly early the next morning, so the narrative isn't fully developed, but I think the Biden was a jerk narrative is actually winning. And it's being pushed along, I think, because of the irresistible nature of the media's irresistible obsession with covering process and video. And the RNC, right after the debate, put out a great video, which you can see on my Daily Caller blog, of Biden laughing and smirking at very inopportune times. So, to me, that's the interesting story. I think the debate was probably a tie, but there's this huge battle to sort of frame who won.
Well, just to put a damper on your liberal media conspiracy theory, if there's any heart to the episode of liberal media, you can make an argument for the Boston Globe, and their headline for their analysis of the debate is "Paul Ryan shows electorate getting to know him. He is no pushover in debate with Joe Biden." So I don't think that there is. I think there's a bias in general of the media to keep things dramatic and keep things close and not call things over too quickly. But I don't think they're itching to write an Obama comeback. I think they're itching to write a plot twist. And I think you can write that plot twist with either one of the narratives that you suggested, and I am seeing both of those narratives. And whether one of those narratives gets a slight edge over the other, again, I don't think that makes much of a difference as far as the final outcome of the race. What I do think, as far as marginal impact is concerned, I do think you shut the door on the chapter, the Obama bad debate chapter of the narrative. You move on to the next thing.
Right, just because it was something,
especially
that would have happened probably no matter how Biden did. I mean, I think
unless Biden had a similar, if he had a similarly, low energy performance, then maybe it would be like this whole ticket's out of gas.
I do think he intentionally overcompensated. I mean, there's the affable, nice Uncle Joe. That guy didn't show up. There was a tough, aggressive, interrupting Joe Biden. It was probably intentional. And even if I suspect that it turned off a lot of independents, but it probably did accomplish the goals of soothing the liberal base, who were kind of in panic mode after Obama's weak performance.
Right. I mean, the base needed to get, perked back up. And I think the risk of turning off independence is very low here because, again, it's the VP debate. No one really cares. So
I think you're right. It could have been a calculated strategic decision for Biden, almost like a sacrifice bunt. I'm in baseball mode, but he sacrificed himself a little bit to win one for the team, which is to say, I'm going to take a hit as being a little bit of a jerk, but I'm doing that to fire up the base to show them that we are tough. Because you and I both know both sides conflate toughness with ideology. If you're tough, then we love you. That matters more than being conservative or liberal.
But your point about the risk of alienating the swing, I don't think Biden did that in this particular performance, but it speaks to the point, Obama can't do this. Obama can't go into the next debate and act the way Joe Biden did. It would be a disaster. And you had all these folks, playing armchair quarterback with Obama's first debate, saying, why didn't you take it to him? Why didn't you shout down the lies? Why didn't you do the fact checking? Why weren't you more aggressive? And you actually have two case studies here. Not only do you have Biden and Ryan, I think, but you also have an example of Paul Krugman and Mary Madeline on ABC's This Week. Krugman actually starts off, giving a little bit of a small elbow to Obama's performance. But then, here you have a Nobel Prize-winning economist versus the political operative, and the political operative is calling the economist a liar over economic statistics. And Krugman can just go over and over and say, no, these are the facts, these are the facts, these are the facts, and the other person's going to say, no, they're not. Now, Krugman wasn't being bombastic the way Biden was. It's different. I mean, say if you have two different strategies.
Right. Well, look, I always thought. This reminds me of what happened at Crossfire. I mean, at the end when they had, journalists like Tucker Carlson and Bob Novak going up against political operatives like James Carville and Paul Begala. I mean, the operatives will always win that debate because they don't, facts really are irrelevant. They spin, they do what they do. I mean, look, Republicans have them, Democrats have them, but it's not fair to match up political operatives versus, journalists.
Academics.
Yeah.
So it's a real challenge in any debate. And I'm not trying to make you accept the premise that the Republicans are lying, but that's only the Democratic premise here. It's a really difficult challenge to deal with someone who's not going to play straight with the facts in real time, especially when you can't look to the moderator to be the fact checker. They never have been the fact checkers in these debates. They don't want to get called out for being biased. So you don't have a referee to help you out. And so if you do say something, what you're saying is not true, the other person's going to say, no, that's not correct. I'm right and you're the liar. And the whole thing looks like a wash. You both look juvenile.
Right.
And that happened if you're the sitting president,
there was a
sitting president, that drags you down. That takes you off your gravitas perch.
All right, I want to get to – I'm tempted to go to illustrate a point where Biden lied last night on a very important thing, but I'm not going to do that because I want to keep up with this. You said that Obama couldn't do what Biden did last night. Was that because Obama stylistically doesn't have the ability to do that, or was it because it would have looked like he was mean and he can't afford to be, as I've heard there were some commentators, even right here on Blogging Heads, who said that he would look like the mean black man, that he couldn't do that. So,
I reject the angry black man premise. I reject the it's not in Obama premise. I think Obama can give pretty hard when he wants to. I think the job of president, the inherent prestige of the position constrains you from playing too rough stylistically. Because it portrays a sense of panic and defensiveness. There's an inherent punching down quality. I'm not saying a president has to be a potted plant. Certainly other presidents have found a way to stand ground and push back in presidential debates, but it's a real art form.
And really by the way, Bill, that reminds me. There is a proud tradition of vice presidents being the attack dog. You could argue that Biden was fulfilling precisely the role that he ought to, that this was like a Spiro Agnew thing. If you own a dog, you don't have to bark. Biden was...
And the difference is that the vice president's not the person that's in everybody's living rooms every day. They're not going to be the father figure for the country. So if they're a little rough around the edges, it doesn't stick in people's craw the same way. And Obama goes in with this, particularly with reputation. I it's been very well refined over the last 4 years of being the American father figure, of being Reagan-esque. In that way, having a very squeaky clean rep. And so to just suddenly go to town on Romney in that setting, could very easily have backfired. Now, you could argue that he overcompensated the wrong way, but it's not so simple a thing to correct. Say you just have to fight harder. It's a more complicated task than that.
So I do think there was one, I think, incredibly substantive thing that happened last night that isn't getting a lot of talk, but I think it's where Joe Biden was wrong, where he said that I'm talking about the attack on the consulate in Benghazi, and he said that the White House was not aware that they had requested more security. That seems to conflict with documented, memos and prior reporting. Nobody caught him on it. Ryan didn't, and the moderator didn't. But that's a pretty serious thing, and it appears that Biden was either wrong or misleading.
Well, again, I don't think we know all the facts yet. I don't know exactly what happened in the hearing that the House Republicans held yesterday, so I'm personally ignorant on some of the recent developments here. But if I recall, what Biden said specifically was, we weren't told. And that could mean different. Is the we literally me and President Obama?
Right. It could be that Biden just didn't know. That's entirely believable.
Right.
Maybe he didn't get the memo.
Or is it we, the White House in total, or we, the State Department? I don't know exactly what Biden was intending to say, and I suspect that he's going to get pressed, that he and Obama will get pressed on this, if not tomorrow, most certainly in the foreign policy debate, which happens towards the end of the month. So I don't. Obviously, this is an issue that's kind of simmering out there, but there is also a flip side of this issue, which Biden did bring up, which is, hey, it's you, Paul Ryan, that voted for the budget that cut our security funding. So you don't get to sit on your high horse here. We had to make tough choices about where we put our resources because you guys were restricting us.
But I should also point out that during the congressional hearings on Wednesday, somebody from the State Department testified that budget cuts had nothing to do with the security situation.
Well, but they also, if I'm correct, they also said if we had more security, it probably wouldn't have made a difference either.
That may be that
wasn't the main issue here.
Here's what I think could happen, Bill. After the Romney-Obama debate, a lot of liberals, I think including yourself, were arguing, yeah, Romney won the debate, but all this stuff, but he said a lot of things that are going to hurt him down the road. And I think this could come back to haunt Joe Biden, that this could be part of a larger narrative, because it does tie into, let's talk about what happened Thursday before the debate, you had Stephanie Cutter, the deputy campaign manager, go on CNN and seem to, I think she probably wishes she had it back. I think she probably misspoke, but she seemed to say that the only reason we're talking about Ambassador Stevens and the death of 4 Americans is because Romney and Ryan are making a big deal out of it. Obviously, even Adam, as it Scher, I believe, at Mother Jones, tweeted, well, maybe the fact that 4 Americans are dead has something to do with it. Anyway, I think this is a big story that's sort of simmering out there. And let me tie it into the debate, and then I'll sort of shut up and let you talk. But I think that a couple things. Number one, Stephanie Cutter seemed, as far as I can tell, she's a communications expert, sort of a political consultant, operative type. Why is she answering questions about being? I think she should defer or refer those questions to the State Department. I think it's a huge mistake. Look, I think Karl Rove and James Carville are great, but I wouldn't. If I were the president, I wouldn't want them talking about national security, foreign policy issues like this on my behalf as a spokesman for me. So I think that was a mistake. I think that Cutter is not ready for prime time. I admire Democrat operatives who are good at what they do. One of my favorite books is, Buck Up, Suck Up, and Come Back When You Foul Up by Carville Bagala. Cutter is not good at spinning. She is horrible on TV. And if you look at the spin room last night, reporting has it that Romney had twice as many people in the spin room. I think that might be partially why the Biden narrative is playing out the way it is. I just think that some of the blocking and tackling isn't happening right now on the Obama side.
I think the actual facts are going to matter whether or not this does become a vulnerable spot. I don't think it could be something that blows up down the line, depending on whether stuff comes out. But I would even if more stuff did come out, which I'm not necessarily expecting. I happen to have watched, as I mentioned last week, I think I watched the 1984 Reagan-Mondale debate, the first one. And Mondale made a parallel attack on Reagan in regards to the Lebanon bombing of the Marine barracks. And sometimes when that incident gets brought up today, it's in reference to the fact that Reagan pulled the troops out afterwards. But that wasn't the criticism that Mondale was making. Mondale was criticizing Reagan because he didn't have enough security there. And he said, you were asked 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, and you didn't do anything, and now here's where we are. And Reagan didn't have a great response to it. But that did not become, a major issue in the final analysis, because Reagan's rep on foreign policy beyond that was seen as restoring America's dominance in the world, restoring America's respect in the world, coming off of where Carter was seen being ineffectual during the Iran hostage crisis. So I do wonder, what exactly you could possibly find in Libya. A single attack that has not mushroomed. One thing, if everything. I know Ryan's pushing out the point that the foreign policy is unraveling, but you have not seen the Libyan government side with the attackers. You've not seen the Egyptian government side with the protests in Cairo, which actually certainly were about that anti-Islam video.
I hear you, Bill, but I think obviously the point that needs to be made is that the seeming cover-up is the big story.
Well, that's the harshest charge being put out there. But even if the initial, the initial statements by the administration about the video in Libya prove not to be accurate, that does not equate cover-up. You need more evidence to prove cover-up. You need more evidence to say they knew it wasn't the video and they felt this was politically damaging to them, and so they deliberately told false information to the public. That's one scenario. The other scenario is simply you had a lot of raw intelligence data that didn't prove out bearing initial information gathering. So if you want to get the cover-up charge to stick, I think, one, you got to get more evidence. And two, you have to show a level of significance that undercuts other foreign policy successes that the administrations have had for the public to care. And those are some pretty high bars to clear in a short window of time before Election Day.
Well, I think it was either naivete or the cover-up. I mean, neither are good. I will say this. I think you make a good analogy, at least an interesting analogy, with Lebanon. And clearly it did not hurt Reagan. I mean, at least not in a serious way. But the fact is, as much as I love Ronald Reagan, and let's be honest, the guy was busy defeating the Soviet Union, kind of had his hands full at the time, but pulling the Marines out of Lebanon, you know, at least from what I've read, was one of the things that emboldened bin Laden and Islamists and showed them, or at least made them think that America was weak and would cut and run. So even if it didn't hurt Reagan politically, there were long-term ramifications. Now, again, as I said, Reagan had a lot on his plate, but that was a low moment, and it did have consequences.
And it's very hard to know what the long-term consequences of foreign politicians are going to be 10, 20, 30 years from now. You know, I mean, people have argued that, you know, George H.W. Bush's actions in the first Gulf War also fed bin Laden's ire, because he wanted Saudi Arabia to hire his forces to protect their border from Saddam.
And all those things, and I think all those things could be true. You know, it could be.
But you could have never foreseen that. I mean, I was not a big fan of the first Gulf War, but I could never predict that was going to be the outcome to that. So, you know, we're very early in what the Arab Spring might mean to American interest in global stability and terrorism and all that. I think it's going to be hard to make the charge stick that the president's actions are unraveling, everything's falling apart, especially because these incidents are actually not escalating. I mean, the fear is that by having by supporting democracy in these countries and having leaders elected who are not our bestest friends, like autocrats like Mubarak in Egypt, that's going to feed Islamic terrorism. But the Muslim Brotherhood runs Egypt, and that's going to, you know, you're giving terrorism control of the state, and then we're all done for. If that happened, that obviously would be a damning result of Obama's foreign policy. Yeah. But we're seeing the opposite bear out so far, that having these folks in charge doesn't feed terrorism. It actually is helping damp it down, because, I mean, just because a protest occurs or an attack happens is not the same as it's spreading like wildfire. The question is, what's the response to it afterwards? The response to it, as far as Americans are concerned, is actually pretty good. So I don't, if things were building up over time, things really blew up in the next 2 weeks, that my argument wouldn't bear out. But so far, I don't think the unraveling charge is going to resonate.
Let me go from the substantive to the more trivial, petty. Do you agree with me that Stephanie Cutter sucks as a political operative and a spinmeister? I mean, she's not very good. Like, do you see that, or is this a Rorschach test?
I'm not nearly as harsh on her as you are. I do think the fuller quote from her is not as damning as you're making it out to be. I'm saying
Obama deserves better. He deserves a better spokesman, and someone like after the Romney-Obama debate, when she looked so flustered and conceding that Romney, if you want to talk about style, he won on style points. I mean, there are a lot of people out there who are better at spinning the press, I think.
Well, I think in that case, I don't think she was freelancing. I think they were making a deliberate strategic decision. How do we deal with this debate without seeming like where this is a completely ludicrous spin. Now, I might actually criticize the strategic choice there. I mean, they could have not conceded style anything and just said, let's just focus on what was said here. Let's not. This isn't a theatrical performance. This is a substantive debate. And what Romney said doesn't stand up to scrutiny. I would have probably played it like that, and not even gone into the style questions at all. That probably wasn't Cutter making her own decision. That was probably a joint decision that involves Axelrod and Robert Gibbs and David Plouffe and all that.
But I think it's like a style thing. Like I think Carville could have said the same thing. Look, if you want to get in there and just talk about style, fine. But this is about. I mean, Carville could have done it in a much more compelling and believable way. I'm arguing that she is not a believable or good spinmeister, but it's. I'm sure no one cares, but that's just. I think Obama deserves better.
Well, so,
I think he deserves better.
Insiders care. Insiders will certainly care. This is sort of what office politics is in Washington circles. So,
well, in fairness, if you're watching this show and you're not in the weeds and you're not into inside baseball, then you shouldn't be watching. I mean, we do nothing. The whole point of this is to talk about stuff that Fox and CNN and MSNBC wouldn't get around to because of the ratings.
I'm sorry. Can you say that again?
I'm saying that this is the place to. If you want to hear inside the weeds, inside baseball banter, you've come to the right place. I mean, that's what we do.
Yes.
So I shouldn't make apologies for it. This is our bread and butter here.
But I think there have been other instances where Cutter has proven a very well-polished and aggressive advocate, able to throw sharper elbows than the president can himself. So I don't think it's fair to say that she has been, the weak link in the president's campaign operation. Today, let's keep in mind the president's campaign operation has worked pretty well over the course of the last several months. But the quote that she had that you're hitting on is, she said this on CNN yesterday, talking about Libya. The entire reason that this has become the political topic, it is because of Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan. It's a big part of their stump speech, and it's reckless and irresponsible. Now, she was not saying in that that no one is allowed to talk about this. That this is not an issue at all. That reporters shouldn't ask questions. She's claiming they're politicizing it and talking about it in a reckless way. Now, you can take that quote out, and this is a testament to maybe not being an example of being inelegant, to use Robbie's phrasing. And your job as a spokesman is to be elegant. That if you're not being elegant, then you're not doing your job. So to your point, this is not her best work, because it can be turned around and said, you are trying to shut down any questioning about this, and it's an ongoing investigation, and how dare you? So I don't think she handled it great in this respect. I don't think it means she is an awful spokesperson, period. It just means that we don't always all bet 1,000.
All right, so before we go, Bill, this wasn't the only debate to talk about. You went to a debate.
Yes.
And so, tell us about that. What was it like?
So I went to the Elizabeth Warren Scott Brown debate on Wednesday, which is the only Western Massachusetts debate of the four that they're going to have. They've had three. This is in Springfield, and it was. It's fun to be there. It's fun. It was a relatively small theater, so every seat was a good seat. It wasn't a debate, even though the moderator tried desperately to get the crowd to be quiet. There was plenty of applause and booing, so you kind of got a flavor of how the various comments were coming. You couldn't look at the crowd necessarily as a perfect barometer of the state. I think the crowd was pretty heavily pro-Warren, but you also had a loud Brown contingent, especially because there's a military base very nearby in Western Mass, and some of the question on military spending. Brown played up his rank, and Warren made a comment. She was asked point blank, "What would you cut? Give me two things you would actually cut." And she was straight. She said, "I would cut farm subsidies and military spending," and she got a little booed for that because they had folks there. So it was sort of interesting to see, that kind of, give and take in the room, which is different how things might look on TV. But as far as the debate itself is concerned, I thought I'm very befuddled by the Scott Brown strategy, period. I sometimes I get what he's doing, sometimes I don't. He started the race, it started the debate process by leaning left. He's got to win in Massachusetts, we all realize that. He was hugging Obama a lot, working across the aisle, talking about bills that the president has signed that he supported, never mentioning Mitt Romney, and he was largely following that track in the second debate, and then he goofed and said that Scalia was his model justice, and Warren's been using that in ads ever since. And in this debate, he went very hard right, and I don't understand why. Maybe it was the questioning, maybe it was because of the pressure Warren was putting on him. Warren has been very on message with Scott Brown stands for the millionaires, billionaires, and oil companies, essentially saying he's fighting for tax breaks for wealthy people and for the subsidies of oil companies. And Brown embraced it in full and said, the top 2% are the job creators. I'm not going to take money out of your pockets and send it to Washington. They're just take. They're pigs in the trough. If we raise taxes on oil companies, it means your gas prices are going up. And these are all kinds of lines. At one point, the Grover Norquist pledge came up, and Brown said, I'm glad Grover Norquist agrees with me. These are all things that might play well in other parts of the country. I don't think.
Have they been trying to make hay out of it? Like, did it just go off into the ether, or has Warren, sort of pushed these lines out in ads?
I know I've heard the ad after the second debate about Scalia. I know they're really running with that very hard. I don't know what they're taking out of this debate. I haven't seen those ads yet. But, keeping in mind, the Warren message at the debate, she said it like 10 times. Scott Brown stands for the millionaires, billionaires, and oil companies. That is a set upon message. At one point, she even got booed with it by the eighth telling by the Brown folks because they were trying to get her to seem like she sounded like a robot, but she stuck with it. Anyway, I don't know, for example, are they going to take the Norquist line and make that into an ad? Do they think enough people know who Grover Norquist is to make that a cutting thing? I'm not sure. But I would think at least you'd hit, Brown literally called he said the words top 2%. Let's not tax the top 2%. Why you wouldn't use that in an ad when that's your main message would be beyond me. I would assume she would. It just seemed like Brown is not staying on the same line for his campaign strategy. I can't. Maybe he thought the western part of the state has more conservative folks, which is half true. But it's still a debate seen by a good chunk of the state, so I wouldn't think you'd be all that regional in your approach with this. So we'll see. And also the other things that people might care about who are watching from afar, the Native American stuff didn't come up once in the debate. I think even Howie Carr, who's the big conservative columnist, the radio talk show host here, he gave sort of a column saying, hey Scott, you don't have to keep talking about this anymore. You can talk about other things. So there's a sense that's played its course. And Brown got in the attacks on Warren about her work with past corporate clients. He got that in once, but there weren't any questions about it from the moderator. So I don't think a lot of blows were landed on Warren. Now, again, as with presidential debates, maybe these debates don't matter at the end of the day. I don't know what the ratings were, and I can't quite tell you what the coverage was afterwards because I'm in the West, and I don't always see what the Eastern folks see. But I do wonder Brown's strategy here if it's going to add up and gel in the home stretch of this race.
Well, we'll keep an eye on that, and I think we probably both think Warren wins just because of just because it's so tough in Massachusetts for a Republican to win in a presidential year. But I think we should do picks. We should go down, and we should go on the record, with our predictions.
And there are a lot of tough calls out there right now. There are a lot of, what's going on in Connecticut is a head scratcher. North Dakota is a head scratcher.
And I'm going to take
Missouri.
I'm going to take Berg, the Republican in North Dakota.
Oh, you want to do the picks right now?
Well, no, I think we should do like a whole segment next week or in a couple weeks on this.
Okay.
But, I'm thinking out loud here. So
Okay.
let's have our
So
producers get together and put
our crack staff,
our team of producers and script writers put together, a list, and we'll do our predictions.
All right, and next week, is the next presidential. The town hall is on Tuesday, so we'll be able to give our takes after that.
Oh yeah, more nights of staying up late watching people fight. But luckily, hopefully, baseball will coincide. I can flip back and forth and not go insane. All right, man.
You're interested in this race, man. I feel like you're not in this. You're not excited.
I would be excited if they did this at about 6 o'clock at night. I like to get up. I used to be a night owl, but now with a child, I do my best writing in the morning. I like to get up early and write, and tough to do when you're writing at 2 a.m. So.
Yeah. I want to ask you one last question, though, about the VP debate.
Yes.
I forgot to ask you. Are conservatives happy with Ryan? I would argue, he held his own. He didn't lose his composure. He might have landed some blows, but he didn't, turn into a puddle after it. But is there a sense still that Ryan is uniquely good? I mean, there's a sense going in that he was sort of like really super special, that he could communicate conservative principles in a way that would really resonate with the middle of the country. I don't think he's really shown that ability yet. Is there any sense on the right that, Ryan's still promising, but maybe he's not quite there yet?
Well, no. I think there is this mainstream media narrative which says that Ryan was picked because he had all these ideas, and he has essentially been co-opted by Romney, and he has not been pushing big ideas. And so why did you I think McKay Coppins at BuzzFeed has a piece out today saying why did they even pick Ryan? That view is not shared amongst conservatives generally. You'll find, I'm sure, that there's some, but as a rule, just anecdotally speaking, conservatives love Paul Ryan. They are enamored by Paul Ryan, and that hasn't changed at all. Now,
even after the time photos.
What's that?
Even after the time photos.
The time photos of him working out.
The photos in the weight room.
Yeah, that hasn't had a big impact on conservatives. Now, I will say that in terms of the debate specifically, I haven't seen anybody saying Paul Ryan kicked ass. Paul Ryan did great. I think generally, although conservatives love him and think he's awesome and he walks on water, in terms of the debate specifically, I think you're right that the general consensus, even amongst conservatives, is that he did well, that he did fine, that he checked off all the boxes. But the story is how rude Joe Biden was. So I haven't seen any conservative talk about how awesome Paul Ryan did. I think everyone thinks he did well, he did fine. But but I don't think there's any buyer's remorse. I think really it's a do no harm, past the threshold of seriousness and being a heartbeat away. Ryan has clearly done that. And so I think generally everybody's happy.
All right, well, let's leave it on that note. Right. A personal plug, my Liberal Oasis Radio Show podcast is now on the YouTube. So if you go to youtube.com/liberaloasistv, we will be doling out clips over the course of the week. I'm also doing the full episodes there. I got to get you on the show soon.
Let's do it. And you can follow the DMZ Show on Twitter at DMZ Show and on Facebook, facebook.com/DMZ Show. Another terrific episode, I must say, Bill. Despite sleep deprivation, we bring it. This is a show that consistently brings it.
Let this be a lesson to Barack Obama. Just because you're president, just because you're busy, doesn't mean you can't bring it come debate time. Get your second win. Suck it up.
We've got kids. We've got baseball playoffs. We've got writing responsibilities. And yet, week in and week out, we show up and provide a hell of a show at no cost to you. Unbelievable.
It's a psychic cost.
Opportunity cost. You do have to spend some time. That's about it. You can listen to this thing on iTunes at twice the speed and knock it out in 20, 25 minutes. So, all right, man.
All right, sir. Till next week.
See you next time on the DMZ. Peace.